Hi, my name is Jill Monroe. I'm a member of the African American Film Critics Association, and today we are thrilled to have a member of the Apple TV Plus series Palm Royale, Amber Chardae Robinson. We're going to talk to her and get all the information, all of the highlights about this series. And before we get into that, I want to introduce you to the members on the call. We have Karan Lenore Kelly, Dana Abercrombie, Nancy Green, Michael Sowell, Derek, and myself. I think that's all of us. So we're going to get it kicked off, and we'll see you on the other side.
How did you get past security?
I came in the back.
There are no doors on the back of the Palm Royale?
I never said I used the door.
I had only been in Palm Beach 2 weeks.
We don't know you.
I'm Maxine Delcourt. But I already knew the Palm Royale, the most exclusive club in the world, was where I belonged.
Evelyn, you are the woman to know in Palm Beach.
I don't like you, Maxine.
You're very good at making things awkward.
I don't concern myself with the shenanigans of vapid poons.
What is Evelyn wearing?
Sleeves. You know anything about rich people?
I parked on the lawn.
Robert, shake me another martini, and then let's play doctor.
Do you work, Maxine? God, no. You want to work.
God, no.
You really want all this?
More than anything I've ever wanted in my whole life.
Like to take a few pictures?
Maxine, you're the lead story. I see us all as one sisterhood.
Are people looking for something new?
Let me tell you a little something about the Palm Royale. It's a nightmare. And that's all thanks to you.
Don't underestimate a Delacourt.
I would never.
Palm Beach is just a shell game. Everybody has a secret.
You two behave.
You don't have to have money. The blackmail is right here.
You don't know the half of it. What in the fires of hell's pits is going on here?
Off we go.
You're in over your head. And girl, you don't even know it.
I am never in over my head. It would be disrespectful to my hairdresser.
Touche.
In Palm Beach, that secret is like a loaded gun. No. You never know when it will go off. Or who it might hit. Ladies! I know, yeah, surprised to see me, considering you left me for dead.
All right, how's it going, Ms. Robinson? First and foremost, thank you for making time to chop it up with us.
Of course.
And my question is, while this is somewhat of a dramatic series, the show star Kristen Wiig is kind of known for more so for comedy. Was there ever a moment while you guys were shooting that you did do something to make you break concentration with the ad-libbing?
All the time. They would give us an opportunity after each scene to just kind of like let the cameras roll and see what we can come up with. And every time I was in a scene with Kristen, me and Laura Dern had moments where we would have to turn our heads away from the camera because she's a comedic genius. The girl is so funny. It's literally like embedded in her DNA. So yes, multiple times she made me break.
Hi, Amber. Carolyn First, Carolyn Todd's podcast YouTube channel. And thank you so much for joining us. So the question I want to ask you has to do with how the show is kind of like is talking about opposites, because in the world of Palm Royale, it's about luxury, it's about wealth, it's about women trying to keep up with their appearances. But then outside of Palm Royale, in the world where Virginia lives, is more centered on reality. She's a Black woman. She has this huge afro. She's wearing the clothing of the late 1960s, early 1970s. And I want you to talk about being in a show where your character is kind of like sitting in the middle of these two types of realities of Miami Beach. And I guess you would say of American culture at that time, because the culture was shifting, and you see it in the dialogue used, the language that the women spoke, the issues that the women were dealing with in Palm Royale. They're more concerned with being accepted, whereas outside, like the women are talking about women's rights. So can you talk about Virginia kind of like standing in the middle of all of that?
I like to say Virginia is a fish out of water in this environment, simply because 1969 for African American people was a very specific time. We're on the heels of the civil rights movement. Fred Hampton was just murdered. We're dealing with a lot as a culture. I mean, we still are every day, but Virginia doesn't have the opportunity to show up like everyone else. They get to choose their privilege. They get to choose that I'm going to live this kind of life. And as Black people, we are born into this world. We have to really live in the reality of it because it's a means of survival. And if we decided to I'm gonna go and be this over here, there's a lot happening, that is hard for us as Black people to ignore. Our reality is constantly shoving in our faces, especially in a time like this. So I feel like Virginia had to be grounded in realism because being a Black woman, you don't have the opportunity or the privilege to be whatever you decide to wake up and be that day. I have to be what the world gives me. I have to meet the world where it is and how it meets me. So that was really important for me as far as being Black in this time and showing who we are at this time.
Yeah, it's all about the luxuries of what women have and what women aren't and what women can have. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hi, Jill Monroe, RSVP with Jill Monroe. Amber, sort of along those lines, I've heard Virginia referred to as a Black feminist, and you talked a bit about the time period. And I think in some ways, the idea of a Black feminist, at least to me, is not something that kind of comes together. So what are your thoughts about Virginia's role and the thought that she is a Black feminist based off of some of the things that you just talked about and the luxuries that are afforded?
It was presented to me when I auditioned for this role. It was presented to me as her being a Black feminist. And I have my own opinions about what feminism looks like for me today in 2024. And there's a lot of blind spots. Black women aren't necessarily at the forefront of the feminism movement because the intersectionality is not there. Us being Black is a part of our identity. And it's a part of America's identity, just Blackness in general. And there was no way that I was going to show up with a blind spot of who she was. I feel like that's where Virginia struggles, is trying to connect with these women because they live two totally, completely different lives. They're born into two different worlds. And feminism and Blackness they don't run in the same circles, even in 2024. So for me, I had to figure out what attracted me to this role was, where do I see myself in that today? And I didn't. And so I was like, I know in 1969, someone who looked like me damn sure didn't. So the challenge for me as the actor was to figure out, where does someone who looked like us at this specific time fit in, and how do they manage that? I don't think it's not the most optimistic thing for someone who looks like us in 1969 to be a part of a movement like this. So I feel like a lot of people see Virginia as maybe a little angry, or she's a realist, or the moral compass of the show. But I learned that, I think as this role progressed, I learned about the grace it took Virginia to be in this environment, the empathy that it takes to be around these people every day. And I feel like if we apply that to today's feminist movement, there would be a lot more bridging the gap for us and them. But I find it a very tricky statement, to label her as a Black feminist, because our Blackness is not, it's not included. There's no inclusivity there when it comes to being a feminist and being Black. So, yeah.
Hi, Karan Lenoir Kelly with Karanism.com and Love Music Pleasure. And I was going to go in a whole different direction, but you took me down this road, so it's your fault. Black feminism was reframed as womanism for Black women. And womanist theory is a thing. It's a really heavy and considerate thing because we consider ourselves in a space that was renamed and reframed in a place where we feminism. My question to you is, what did you learn about Virginia that made her so strong? There were so many comedic moments, and you had a whole lot of them in sister girl moments, like, girl, what you doing? But how do you see yourself in Virginia? And how did you find just the grounding to push her through, knowing that she was in an environment where she wasn't included?
I do see myself a lot in Virginia. Even when my family watches the show, they were like, "That's how you are in real life," and I'm like, "Stop." But I think I had a teacher in grad school tell me that comedy it's only funny to the audience because the person who's playing that part takes it completely seriously. And I believe Virginia is like, what the, she really can't fathom some of the things that are happening in front of her, like the privilege, the caucasity of it all. And I think that makes it funny because as Black people, when we're put in these environments, and let's say another Black person is in the room and something like that happens, we have that connectivity to where we'd be like, you saw that, I saw that too. Like, but we never get a chance to like see that on a global scale, what that looks like being Black in these white spaces, especially at a time like this. And for Virginia to be so vocal and so grounded and so sure of herself in a time like this was something that I have not seen done before, which really attracted me to this role because I was like, the strength that she has in this time with these people is unheard of. And I feel like that story needed to be told. And it just reminded me of myself because the more and more I grow in this industry, the more and more I see people that look like me, but they're kind of far and few in between. And so I'm usually that voice that's the realism voice. And people think it's so funny, but I'm being honest. Like, I'm just like, that's wild, like, and they're like, oh, we just love having you around. And I'm just like, I'm just being me. That's just how I was raised. I'm Southern. So being in white spaces and where I come from is very different. And being the only in those spaces is sometimes uncomfortable, but the way I deal with it is just by being who I am. And people tend to like that. And I'm like, well.
Well, I'm grateful for your performance and for its authenticity. Thank you so much for the brilliance that you present. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Michael Sowell from Washington, D.C. I actually really loved your performance in this show. It actually reminded me in terms of my wife, actually how she is in terms of the workplace and not just, just being around her 24/7. And one thing I really appreciate is that when you're talking about, being who you are, being fully authentic and who you are in these environments, in these roles, particularly in the 1960s, is not really highlighted as it should be. Can you just talk about your decisions as an actress, deciding that I want to do this role, but not only that, I want to do it in terms of just see how way I can perform and this character, but more importantly, the impact will have for audiences?
It was a very specific choice, I think, and I worried a lot while I shot. I worried about whether I was representing us in the best light or making sure that I was crossing all of my T's and dotting all of my I's, because I know how important it is to be the only one in the room. And like, I know what the audience or the demographic is going to look like, but I hope that being my authentic self as Virginia would open the eyes of other people who may not look like us to people who sound like me, who look like me, and maybe that'll open the doors for us in these environments. More people that look like us, sound like us will be in these environments and will infiltrate these environments. But I always think it's important to be authentic because I am such a stickler for inauthenticity. I can feel it as soon as I walk into the room. As soon as somebody opens their mouth, I'm like, you can feel it. And I just think it's important to just show up as your whole self. I worked very hard in therapy to show up as my whole self. And I'm really happy that it's reflecting in my work.
Yeah, I just want to say you have reflected us in the most highest regard. So I just want to say thank you. So,
hi, I'm Nancy Green with Film Critique.
Hi, Nancy.
And, I have two questions. First, I wanted to know how many times on set did you guys end up singing Living La Vida Loca? And And secondly, I wanted to know, one of the things that I really liked was in the very first episode, the narration talking about how, you know, if women have ambitions in the world, our problem is usually other people. That's the catch. And I wanted to know, you touched upon this earlier. I wanted to know if you can talk about some specific instances in your own life that maybe kind of, you know, you reflected on as you were doing the show that were similar to that sort of thing, places where you found yourself up against challenges that you might not have otherwise faced if you weren't a woman.
I was saying Living La Vida Loca to myself in my trailer because I couldn't believe that it was Ricky Martin. You know, when Living La Vida came out, Living La Vida Loca came out, I had to be like 10 or 11 years old, maybe even younger. So to be in the room with him, I was like, that's Living La Vida Loca. So I did have a little moment where I was singing it to myself. I've never sung it to him though, but I did get the opportunity to go to one of his shows and watch him sing it live, which was like a full circle moment for me, which was really cool. But to answer your second question, I think for me, it's just learning how to be like a revolutionary in my own life as a woman. And for other women, I've always had this like, because I was raised by strong women, like the demographic in my family, we have more women than men. And so learning how to use my voice and knowing that how I feel and my intuition and my gut is okay to trust is what I learned a lot from Virginia in this. And I've always been the girl who's spoken up for other girls when you don't need to deal with that. You ain't got to deal, you know, tell other women that's not right, you know. But I didn't have the necessary like context for it. I just knew when something wasn't right and, you know, right versus wrong. So I've always had this like revolutionary spirit. And so when I did Judas and the Black Messiah and then I did this, it kind of pulled that out of me more. It gave me the tools and the terms and the consciousness for it. And now I feel like I'm ready to go to war for women, like especially Black women, because there's so much there and there's so much to unpack and so much to fight for us within our own community. So yeah, I feel like this role brought out my inner revolutionary.
Nice, very nice, lovely, and thank you. And it's a, you know, with all of the drama and everything too, it's a fun show. I enjoy
it. It really is. Thank you.
So Derek Dunn, Reviews and Dunn, out of the DC area. And my question is, if you could use one word to describe your character to potential viewers, what would that word be?
A revolutionary. Revolutionary. I think that's the word of the day. But yes, that's the word.
Thank you again, and great job on the show.
Thank you so much.
So before we talked a bit about the luxuries that women have and can't have with regards to the world of Palm Royale and the world outside of it, I want to talk a bit now about how comedy is used in the show to kind of address these topics. You mentioned it before when with Karan's answer, and usually I think recently we haven't had a lot of films or shows set in this time period where comedy plays a part in the storytelling. Before we had shows like The Jeffersons, and you know that we had that comedy, but we haven't had comedy in, like, I would say literally decades, and stories set in the late around the social revolution of both women as well as the civil rights movement. So talk to me about working with the writers and the directors to get the comedic tone of who Virginia is. Like, she's very serious, but is like she still has that sense of comedy, because having the character of Kristen Wiig's character, like, she's absurd to be around. So like all of her scenes have a touch of comedy, no matter how serious the scene itself is.
I think they wanted to. I feel like Virginia is the moral compass of the show, and I felt like everybody was on board with that thought process of her being the moral compass of the show. So it's like when you put Virginia in a scene, you have to realize, like, I think when writing, you have to realize how absurd all the circumstances are. And is there one person in this room who understands how absurd this is? And if it is, it's going to be Virginia every single time. And again, comedy is more about, it's not about cracking a joke, it's more about, it's real. And we were all thinking it. And Virginia says whatever the audience is thinking. And she's completely serious. None of this stuff she's like, oh, that's funny. No, she's completely serious. And I think that's what makes it so funny, is because everybody's already thinking what Virginia is getting ready to say.
Yeah, she very much is it's the situation.
I don't hear. She is like,
Right. Thank you so much, and great job with the show and with Virginia.
Thank you.
Amber, it's Jill again. So we're talking about this being a period piece set in 1969, and you were born a little bit after that. So
later.
Sort of diving into the backstory of the environment and the times of that era to, set the stage for Virginia as a character.
Well, for me, we're talking about revolutionaries. I did research on Angela Davis and Kathleen Cleaver and Audre Lorde to see, and I know some of these women, they're in the Black Panther Party, so they're around our people. And so I was like, what does that look like if we took Angela Davis and put her in Palm Beach and put her surrounded by all of these white people? How would she navigate it? They were the blueprint for me as far as like forming Virginia, trying to figure out what she held near and dear to her heart versus what drove her every day to get up out of bed and come to this bookstore and try to help women. Because in Palm Beach, there weren't a lot of people that looked like us. So it's, what's the next best thing? How do I still keep that fire going inside of myself? Even when my people are still struggling in this time period, like, what can I do? I feel like Virginia had this, what can I do? And the next best thing was women, people who we may not look alike, but we have the same genetic makeup. And how do I help us uncolonize our minds and take the patriarchy out of the forefront of our minds and let them know that independence is there. You can live your life. You can take care of yourself. And men ain't all the end all be all.
This question is from our esteemed colleague, Dana Abercrombie, and she asks, can you talk about the importance of laying the groundwork to build Virginia's friendship with Linda?
I think Virginia realized that, again, there's not a lot of people that look like me. So how can I find someone with the same level of consciousness, intellect, someone who kind of thinks like me? I think they became friends, and they realized that this relationship could work and we could help people. It's just about finding your tribe wherever you are. I think whenever you're in a different place, I know for me, when I went to Columbia, being one of 5 Black kids in my class, I had to figure out, okay, being from the South, I'm so used to being around Black people. I had to figure out how to adapt and how to connect with people that may not look like me. And it opens up a whole world of things that you have never been exposed to, problems, issues, conundrums. And I think it was a part of Virginia's survival in this place.
And this is from me and not Dana, but bring the light with all the sequins. Thank you for showing up like this.
Of course.
Well, we want to thank you, Amber, for joining us on behalf of the largest group of Black TV and film critics. Thank you for joining this version of the AAFCA Roundtable series.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor.